Hello, it's Jim Hutchins for the Jerusalem Connection Spot Report for this week. The news today still surrounds, especially with regarding Israel, still surrounds the results of the Geneva Convention, where Secretary of State John Kerry tried to get a deal with Iran to get them to stop their pursuit of nuclear weapons. It failed, fortunately, because the French stepped in and called a halt to it. But there's been some significant results as a result of these efforts on the part of the Secretary of State. Significant, yes, I say so. For example, writing for the Jerusalem Post, Caroline Glick, who I have found her writings to be very astute. She has a good analysis of what's going on with Israel and the world. She said this: what happened in Geneva, the Geneva Convention last week, was the most significant international event since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. She said the collapse of the Soviet Union signaled the rise of the United States as the sole global superpower. The developments of the six-party nuclear talks with Iran in Geneva last week signaled the end of American world leadership. Global leadership is based on two things: power and credibility. The United States remains the most powerful actor in the world, but last week, American credibility was shattered. Secretary of State John Kerry spent the first part of the last week lying to Israeli and Gulf Arab leaders and threatening the Israeli people. He lied to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Saudis about the content of the deal that the U.S. and European negotiators had achieved with the Iranians. Lied about the deal. Kerry threatened the Israeli people with terrorism and murder, and so invited both, if Israel fails to accept his demands for territorial surrender, to PLO terrorists that reject Israel's right to exist. Kerry's threats were laced with bigoted innuendo. Strong words. Wish Ms. Glick would tell us how she really feels. But then following that, last week, there was a meeting of Secretary of State John Kerry with a group of senators in Washington. And basically, he said, coming out of that, the senators who were briefed on Wednesday about recent talks with Iran were reportedly told, quote, ignore the Israelis, ignore anything they say. Ignore the Israelis. One senator, a member of the Banking Committee, described the briefing as very unconvincing, and in what seems more disturbing, he said it was anti-Israeli. Secretary of State briefing senators. He goes on, I was supposed to disbelieve everything that Israel had just told me and think the Israelis probably, I think Israelis probably have a pretty good intelligence service. He added that the Israelis had told him that the, quote, total changes proposed by the Geneva Convention proposal would set back Iran's program 24 days max. One Senate aide familiar with the meeting said that every time anybody would say anything about what would the Israelis say, they'd get cut off, and Kerry would say, you have to ignore what they're telling you. Stop listening to the Israelis on this. Forget Israel. Ignore Israel. Well, for sure, there will be many of the world's leaders who do that. And in many cases, it's going to be to their own peril. But there's one who will not forget. There's one who will not ignore. God says this, if I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill. Let my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth. If I do not remember you, and if I do not consider Jerusalem my highest joy. Can a mother forget her nursing child, or have no compassion on the child that she has borne? Though she may forget, I'll not forget you. See, I've engraved you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are ever before me. That's what God says. God will not forget Israel. Nor will Christian Zionists, who believe that the eternal covenants of God are as valid today as when they were given. God will not forget Israel. He will not ignore Israel. Till next week, Od Ki Yavo Shiloh, or until Messiah comes, Yivarecha Yahweh. God bless you.